If you watch my videos over the last 6 months, you probably know about how much I love Convex. If you've somehow missed that, don't worry, we'll go in detail, but we're not necessarily here just to talk about Convex. We're here to talk about the state of databases and how we build things with databases, especially if we're using AI to do it. I'm talking about this for a handful of reasons. The big ones are some stuff I've been seeing on Twitter. What a surprise. Peter here has been building a ton of stuff with AI recently. And when I say a ton, I can't properly explain it without just showing you his GitHub. It's a little absurd how much stuff he has been building. And he's recently gotten Convex pilled. He just migrated a ton of things over. Everything worked immediately. And he's super impressed. The main reason I'm doing this, though, is another video by another creator. Robin just published this video about why he stopped using Supabase. And I have a confession to make. I've never built anything serious with Supabase. So watching this video, I learned a lot about building with Supabase. And yeah, it's time to get off Supabase. I want to be very clear. This video is not being paid for or even approved by Convex or anybody else in the database space. I am filming this not because I want Convex to like me or because I want to get some money from somebody. I'm filming this because I want to make sure you don't trap yourself as you're building more and more applications and that you build on things that I actually like and recommend. And just to be very, very clear, the only people paying for today's video are this sponsor.
I'm going to show you guys a quick magic trick. This is my cat, Miles. I'm going to pet him while also vibe coding. Here we see, oh, you weren't supposed to see that part. I'm getting a call from Tupel. I'm going to port this app over to Swift while petting my cat. Watch this. I just need to think about it when I look at my computer. Totally don't have to click this share screen button hidden in the corner. Why would I do that? This demo would be a lot more compelling if my channel manager knew how to type. This is with Opus. Do you know how expensive that is? It's probably more money than the Tupel subscription. If you couldn't tell, what we're actually demoing here is Tupel. It's by far the best way to do pair programming, even if you're both in the same room. I have Ben right there, and when I want him to take over my machine, we still use Tupel because it's easier than handing him my laptop. It's actually genuinely really cool what you can do with Tupel. It's silly, but it's actually really nice. You can get a bunch of people on a call together. You can review code together. You can even have different people on your team writing code and making changes on your machine when you're distracted petting your cat. I was super skeptical of a dedicated product like this before because, like, you already have Zoom, right? I haven't used Zoom since I got this because it's so much better for working with your team, for actually reviewing code together, for actually using each other's computers because they can do things on my machine. No longer do you have to like be back and forth in a call saying, hey, can you go change this line? No, not that one below. No, you're on the wrong line. You just click on it using the UI, using the cursor on your computer. You can just select the text you want. You can delete things. You can add things. You can do things. It's like if Zoom was for people who were actually productive on their computers instead of people sitting around yelling at each other in meetings and not getting anything done. If you're tired of pairing being miserable on Zoom, Google Meet, or whatever else, and you want to be more productive with your team, there is no better app than Tupel for torturing your coworkers. Being a good pairing engineer. It's actually really nice. Miles agrees. Good boy. What are you waiting for? Try it now at soydev.link/Tupel. As I said before, Robin's video is awesome. It's linked in the description. I highly recommend watching it, but I want to highlight one particular point from it before we go through all of the reasons why I think you should stop using Supabase and use something super useful like Convex.
And trust me, this matters even if you're like me and you don't mind paying for things that are actually worth it, because Supabase punishes you for having ideas. Their free plan limits you to 2 active projects. And if you want to test a third one, a fourth one, or a fifth one, you have to delete or at least pause one of the old projects, making them temporarily inaccessible. But the real kick in the nuts happens when you do decide to give Supabase money, because their billing is organization based. And the moment you upgrade an organization, which you can think of as a group of projects, to the Pro plan, you lose the right to have any free projects in that organization. Think about it like this. If you have 5 hobby projects and you decide to upgrade one of them to the Pro plan, they will all automatically be converted into paid instances. Each, here's the kicker, to a minimum of $10 a month. So if you have 10 ideas you're playing with.
Yeah, I did not know this was a thing. I had no idea at all. And just for contrast, here is my dashboard on Convex. Want to guess how much money this account costs me? This is my personal account. Jamie, this is a comped account. Are you comping my personal? Okay, I did not know that. but I am almost positive it would have been free otherwise because of how cheap they are for things that aren't getting much traffic. You can have 40 deployments for free and up to 6 people on the team as well. That is absurdly generous. Like, absolutely absurdly generous. And even though I was wrong and technically I am comped on just my personal, by the way, I'm paying quite a bit of money on the paid tier because it's important to me. Yeah, I have 25 projects here. This would cost $0. This would be free. That is insane. That's just one of the aspects, though. There's a handful of aspects I want to talk about here. So why Convex and not Supabase? The first piece was the pricing, which I can go a lot more in detail on, and we will in a second. Next piece is the capability of the platform. There's so much cool stuff that we'll talk about here, but one of the most important is agent development. So let's finish up pricing really quick because there's a lot to think about here. It's important to understand with these platforms that they aren't just databases. Neither Convex nor Supabase are just a place to store data. They are both open source and they're both built on top of SQL. Supabase is much more leaning into it being Postgres, and you can just query the Postgres with SQL traditionally whenever you want. They also have their SDKs and platform on top where you can use them as a row-level security handling system to choose what users see what, and then connect a user directly to the database through Supabase's compute plane in order to sync data up and down when things change. Convex is a much heavier abstraction. Like, the fact that Convex uses SQL under the hood is not something you should think about or be concerned about because you'll never touch it. Supabase is a different way of doing Postgres. Convex is a different way about doing application data. So they're very different in that regard. But in terms of what they offer, at least seem similar. Both have object storage for files and things. Both store your data. Both have sync in real time where data changes and immediately appears on the client. Both have the ability to run some compute on their platform. Both have auth, but the way they work around that varies. Both have SDKs for everything, but there's a huge difference in how they think about stuff. With Convex, you write queries and mutations. With Supabase, you model the data and then access it directly. Convex has you write real code to choose what data goes to users. Supabase has you architect the database to expose certain data to users. If that sounds scary to you, it's because it is. And the few people I know who are still using Supabase, I highly, highly recommend that they don't use Supabase as a sync layer, and instead they focus on Supabase as a place to store and handle Postgres. But let's go more into the pricing now that we understand this, because they both offer compute, they both offer auth, they both offer file storage, and all these other things. The free tier on Supabase gives you up to 50,000 monthly active users, a 500 megabyte of storage database, and 500 megs of RAM on that, shared CPU, 5 gigs of egress, 5 gigs of cached egress, a gig of file storage, and support. Once you bump up to the $25 a month plan, which you have to pay for separate from the $10 a month per project, 100K of monthly active users, 8 gigs of disk size, because you have to think about these things as they're a traditional compute platform, 250 gigs of egress, 250 gigs of cached egress, 100 gigs of file storage, yada, yada. But this is the big thing. You have to think about the box it's running on, because Supabase is running a real database and compute on it that users connect to. So getting this all right, obnoxious. Convex does things a little bit differently because their compute works differently too. You see my videos covering the difference between Vercel and Cloudflare, where I talk about how their compute's abstractions at a different level. Convex is similar in this regard. They built their own compute layer similar to Cloudflare's that runs isolates that allow you to connect to this code you write that is on the same box as the database. So everything is way faster, and it also can be way more dynamic. You never have to worry about your database sleeping on Convex because it costs them a lot less money to run it. Your compute isn't running unless somebody's connecting. All of these things are just differences in the architecture that came from the Convex team having a ton of experience with this when they built up the data platforms at Dropbox. They know databases and scaling them really well, and they scale up and down wonderfully for this reason. A database on Supabase costs Supabase the same amount of money whether or not there's any traffic on it. A database on Convex costs them a lot less when it's not in use, and it costs them more when it is, which means that the costs reflect the usage much better, and it feels a lot less bad as a result. And you can see that as we scroll. You get 1 million function calls a month for free, and then it's $2.20 for the next million. You get 20 gigabyte hours of compute, and this is measured by how many gigs of RAM over how many hours. That's a lot of compute because you're probably not doing much compute on Actions, depending on what you're doing with Convex. Database storage, still not a lot of storage, 500 megs. I think that's actually the exact same as with Supabase, but it's 50 gigs of storage on the Pro tier, and then 20 cents per gig when you go over. And that's also still the $25. And we'll talk about the per developer month piece in a little bit because it isn't as important as you think. File storage, yada, yada. All these numbers are fair. The only one I would argue is slightly expensive is file bandwidth, where they charge you 30 cents per gig of file read out. But they've also been building things to let you put that on a CDN so that you don't have to pay it. In fact, the CEO is in chat, and before I even said this, said the same. The file bandwidth costs are too high, but he's also building things to fix this. In particular, he is building a new Convex component, which a whole thing we'll get into, for Convex file storage to put it on a CDN like Bunny. Super, super cool stuff. Yeah, you also can pay for usage on the Pro plan on Convex without having to bump to the Pro tier. They're just good. Like, I don't know how to put it other than that. Like, these are guys who deeply understand us as developers, especially in the TypeScript world, that deeply care about us and DX and pricing and all these things. Anytime something feels unfair, they know it first and they're already on it. Like, how telling is it that I got sniped out as I was about to say this is too expensive? Jamie's typing it in chat at the exact same time. We've never talked about this before. We just both know it because we're both realistic. And they are so realistic about these things. So pricing, they're slaughtering. It is very fair, very good. Scales great. I am spending a decent bit of money on Convex, and I know all of the ways I can cut the bill, but I also have no interest in doing it because the things I'm doing that cost more money, specifically, we are doing just insane amounts of database bandwidth because I generously read from the database to cache data on the client. If I was to tone that down at all, we could cut our bill in half, but I don't care because it's still cheap enough. I just don't. And on our main account for T3 chat, we are spending thousands of dollars a month on Convex because we want to, because it's great. And I wouldn't change a thing. I am very, very happy with what we're spending. It is not much more than we were spending on Planet Scale before. So that's enough about pricing. I want to go into this first. We're going to change the order a little bit because the capabilities will become clearer after we talk about how building with Convex works. The biggest difference between how Convex building works and something like Supabase is that all of the state is kept inside of the folder in your project. I have a bunch of different projects using Convex heavily. This is T3 chat, like the actual T3 chat code base. And you'll see Convex is a folder here in the project. There's the source folder for all of the front end code using TanStack Start, but there's this other folder next to it named Convex that handles all of how Convex works. You have a schema.ts file that describes all of the things that your database has in it. Ours for this is complex because this is a very complex app. But if I go to a simpler app like my new Image Studio thing I've been working on, you will see in here, the schema is quite a bit simpler. Comically so. We export the default defined schema. It has generations, which is a table that includes user IDs, prompts, the mode, the status, created at, completed at, and indexes. Generation output, which is a table, has user ID, generation, model, display name, etc. for all of the things that we want to show in the UI. Editing threads for the conversations where you're editing things. It's just a cool feature I added. But all of this is tables that are defined in the project as a file in the Convex folder. Normally, you would need some abstraction for this, like an ORM of some form, or a bunch of craziness around migrations and management to keep track of what the state of the database is between the server and whatever you're consuming it from. The database and the server and the client being kept in sync is obnoxious. This is a big part of why I originally built Create T3 app in the T3 stack to try and streamline how you build the relationship between these things. Where things become magical, though, is how you consume this stuff. If I want to expose generations to users to access them, I have to define a function for that. So if I want to list all of my generations, here is how I do it. I have a query, which is imported from their library. It has a limit as one of the arguments, so you can optionally limit how many things you get back. And then you write TypeScript. I have this getAuthUserID function that checks and gets a user ID. And if there is no user ID, I return nothing because you're not signed in. Then I have a limit. I either use 50 as the default or I take the limit you passed me. And then I get the data. Context.db.query generations with index using one of those indexes. And here's where some of the magic starts. Watch what happens if I delete characters. Oh, That's a type error because it knows exactly what the database has in it. What if I hit a different table that doesn't exist? Oh, all type errors because it doesn't exist. This is awesome. It makes it way easier to know when your code is broken because you'll get errors in your editor, in your LSP, and your agents can get those errors too. Starting to see where this gets helpful. Also of note, nothing has to be done in order to get this code to work on your account. You don't have to go configure anything in any dashboards. You just run it. If I want to change what data is exposed, like I want to limit access to generations here. I want to make it so only certain whitelisted users can see it or something. I don't go to a dashboard and configure some shit. You can't do it that way. You make changes to your Convex deployment by editing the code for your Convex deployment. Everything you can do on Convex can be done in this folder. That's the magic. AI is really bad at state. It's really bad at remembering what things are set up as in the database versus how they're set up in your editor versus how they are in prod versus dev versus what you're working on right now versus the pull request that you're referencing. None of that works that way in Convex because it's all just a folder with files that describe the infra. It's so nice. Everything is just described here. Everything that my Convex deployment does for Image Studio and for T3 Chat is just defined in this folder. So if an agent wants to make changes, it can just edit the files. And now when I make changes, as long as you're running the convex dev command, those changes will ship up to my dev instance immediately. Let's say I stop including some field in here. Like I remove streaming as an optional status here. It deployed. I can re-add it. It deployed. Let's kill completed this time. Oh, it can't because there's a bunch of things in the database that match that field. That's really annoying. Let's go fix that. So this is image Claude code, I believe. I have all of my data in this database, and it has all of these things that are status completed. Here is one of those oh shit moments I have with Convex. I'm going to manually delete this data. Confirmed. I'm switching back to my terminal. As soon as the data was deleted, it redeployed by itself. I didn't have to tell it, you can deploy now. It knows it can't deploy because of that data. So when the data's gone, it knows it can now push because everything is synced by default. It's magic. And do you know how good this is for unblocking your agents? This is so good. There are so many weird edge cases that I used to deal with all the time because my data was in different states in prod, in dev, on one machine, on another machine, and in my code base. They're all just gone now. It's very clear when something's broken, and it's even clearer how to fix it. Also, when I had that there, notice that there's now a type error in generations because here I set the statuses of failed or complete, but complete's not a valid status. Save that. Now we're good. It's that easy. And your agents are so much smarter with it too. This is my first time ever reading any of this code. This whole project was built by Claude Code. And Claude Code, Codex, Cursor, all of these tools love Convex because they don't have to do some weird MCP jujitsu bullshit in order to change the way your database works. With Supabase, you have to connect to the database, make changes there, edit the code to mirror the way the database should be working, and just orchestrating all of that is obnoxious. Nothing is necessary here. You just write the code and then it deploys. And the sync, by the way, which is one of the coolest parts, you have to do anything for it. Here I have the list query that lists all of the things that you've generated for your user. We index by user ID so we can only select things for you as a user. And then you render the results and then you return them. That's it. And now, whenever a change happens, it updates the client accordingly because there's no other way to access this data. You can't mutate it by sneaking behind the scenes and editing the SQL or calling that directly. The only way this data changes is by hitting a mutation that is running on the same compute layer in front of the database. So when a mutation happens, it knows what rows are hit, and it invalidates the cache that it has for all of the queries that hit that data. And when the cache gets invalidated, it sends the update. It's so good. And it also means the vast majority of your queries are just hitting the cache. More cool things here, by the way. There is no join syntax. There is no weird special way to do things. You just write TypeScript. If you want to link the results to generations, because a generation is a request a user made to generate something, a generation has different results that exist for it, because one generation might produce 4 images, and you link the two like this. You just take the output, you dot map on it, and then you additionally query for every additional thing. This seems terrifying. Doing a dot map on some other DB call that awaits, that's going to be 50 to 500 awaits. That can't be right. It's totally fine and blessed. And this is just TypeScript. We're not doing some weird syntax for joins to try and streamline how the query gets managed. We trust Convex and their query planner to handle all of this for us. And we just do a map with an await, and it works. Couldn't be easier. And we're still just in the basic queries here. Mutations are just as simple. You define a mutation like delete output. It has an ID. You get the user ID. You get the output. If no output, we throw an error. We get the generations. And if the generation's user ID is not the same as your user ID, we throw an error. This is actually one of the biggest problems with platforms like Supabase, is the relationship between the data and who can control it is defined almost arbitrarily within the database itself as RLS. That is not codified in your code base. There is no definitive document that shows who can access what. In Convex, you have to write queries and mutations. You cannot change the data without one of these functions, which means you have to write it, which means it's very obvious when you're not doing things right with permissions because it's source code that can be read. Couldn't be better. And again, this is all stuff your agents can control. I don't want to just go into glaze mode, and I saw Yash complaining about a thing I have feelings about too. The only exception to the you never have to go to the dashboard rule is environment variables, which are still quite annoying to manage. It'd be really nice to have something like T3env where I can define all of the environment variables I need access to in code. And if I put them in this project, like I have an env file here, it will automatically sync those up. I know the CLI can do environment variables, Jamie, but I want to go further. I want the same experience I have for everything else in Convex for that. If I have a file in the code base that is environment, that lists all the environment variables, and it sees those environment variables in my local dev environment, it will auto-sync those the same way it syncs up the code. Yeah, this comment from Zach's actually very telling. Supabase was largely built to be an alternative to Firebase that was open source and actually well-maintained. And in Firebase, all of the rules were files that were JavaScript. Supabase tried to copy that behavior with RLS. It was a design decision that made sense for app devs in 2010 to 2015 because they hated building servers, web service layers, all of those things, and they just wanted to rapidly build apps. Firebase didn't even add web support until much later. Yep. We are all dealing with the tech debt of people who were too scared to deal with servers and write server code. And this is the funniest part with Convex. They've effectively tricked you into writing server code. Most of the apps I'm building, especially the ones I'm vibe coding now, they're not using Vercel's backend at all. They're using Vercel almost exclusively as a CDN, and Convex is the backend. And I'm just writing functions, and I'm calling them on client and not thinking about it, and it just works. And if you do want to access outside services, you can do that as well with actions. So queries and mutations are for when you're just hitting the database and nothing else. You're not fetching, you're not touching external stuff, because they have to be deterministic in order for them to work, because of how the caching and everything works. Actions can touch external stuff. So here's a fun example. Again, I'm learning this code base as we go because AI agents can write this all so well. I haven't had to even look at the code. Start thread with prompt is how you create a new generation. And in here, we have an action call where we schedule a new action to run when this mutation is done because everything's been added to the database. And then we want to run this action to do a generation. We pass all of these inputs. And you can command click, as you can everywhere in Convex, to get to this action. Here are all of its arguments. Might look like Zod, because it very much is like Zod. And we have the handler. Here we run a mutation to update the status to streaming so that we know that this result is being done. I grab my file key. I configure it. I then run the generation request. I have the inputs that I'm transforming for the specific model that we're using. I then make the request to fal. And here I'm doing some crazy stuff with the stream because I want a long story there. Get the results, get the data, get the URL. This is all any's because this is coming from fal's SDK, which is a lot less type safe than what they have over at Convex. And then I just run another mutation with the output when I'm done. But this is how I interface externally. You have to define the mutation separately because, again, mutations and queries have to be pure. They have to just interface with the database. But once you've defined those, an action can call them willy-nilly. And you see what that looks like here. It's super convenient. And an action is an actual server function that you're running that can do real compute. You could even run it on Node if you want, which is as simple as use Node at the top of the file. Now this is using Node instead of their compute layer. Pretty cool, right? None of this is possible on something like Supabase. So hopefully this helps emphasize why agents are so good at this, because they just write TypeScript. None of this is really special syntax that's specific to Convex. They're not making you define something in a special .prisma file or writing some crazy join syntax. Almost all of the syntax is just TypeScript. But I promised I would talk more about capabilities, and I really want to do that because there are some things that Convex does that just nothing else comes close that are really, really cool. Components are one of my favorite. Components aren't what they mean in the React world. Components are a set of capabilities that you can bundle up and add to your Convex deployment. All of these are things you could build yourself, but they have instead built for us. The Stripe one, I harassed poor Mickey into building for us. I'm so happy that that exists now. The AI agent one is great for just giving you the pieces you need to do agent orchestration. One of my personal favorites, though, the rate limiter is really cool. My favorite that I'm looking for in here, the work pools. Work pools are so cool. If you want to make sure some external API is only being hit concurrently up to 5 times, you can spin up a work pool that has a parallelism limit of 5. And now, when you call things within this work pool, you can enqueue an action, and it's now parallelized with limits. And it will handle the queuing and everything else by itself. This is code that they wrote for us that you can install in your app and use. Normally, this is something you'd bring another service in for. And that's what's so cool with Convex components, is it feels like you're installing an external service provider without having to leave the Convex folder in your code base. And again, this is really powerful for agents too. They don't all know about all of the components or that they can go find them yet, but if you quickly browse through the available ones and find one that solves a problem, you can tell your agent about it. It will go find all of the docs and everything, especially if you give it a link, and it will implement it totally fine. We have been using work pools heavily for features in T3 chat, and it has made life so much easier. Even has things like retry management, completion handling, and all the other annoying things you have to do when you're managing workloads like this. If you want to see this in depth, you should check out my video about reading billions of rows, the one about the T3 wrapped stuff, because I showcase this in that. We used it heavily. It's so good. Just like one of the many examples. They have one for crons too, if you want to have like things that run on certain time frames. They have integrations with other services as well. Like if you want to serve and store files from R2 instead of using their storage, there's a component for that. If you want to use resend for sending transactional emails, there's a component for that. If you want to build a collaborative text editor where multiple people can edit text at the same time and have that all handled for you in your database, there's a component for that. It's so cool. They even have components for different auth providers like BetterAuth. I was going to mention Autumn. Autumn's another platform for managing your Stripe like payment stuff. And Autumn's getting almost as much use out of their component as the Stripe one is. Good work, Autumn. They're also just barely eking out Polar right now. It's so cool. Meanwhile, with our friends over at Supabase, you kind of just have to hope and pray somebody there cares enough about the problem you have to deal with it. I just was looking for an example of what the work pool equivalent is on Supabase. How do you handle long-running or execution-heavy backend tasks where edge functions aren't enough? First reply, Cloudflare Worker. Yep. Oh, and branching. We should talk about this a little bit, because one of the coolest parts with Convex that I saw them talking about in chat but haven't brought up is the way they think about dev and like preview environments. Every dev gets their own environment. Remember earlier when I said that this per developer month thing doesn't really matter that much? I still vividly remember this conversation I had with Mark when we had Yash, our first intern, join. He was very happy with Convex, but was surprised that they were going to charge us more money to add Yash to our Convex service. I asked him, why would we have to add Yash? He said, of course we have to add him. We have to add him to everything if he's going to be working with us. No, we don't. Remember what I said earlier about how using Convex works? You just run npx convex dev. And if you're not on our team account, who cares? It just deploys in your personal dev account. That's it. It's so easy. You just run the dev command. It spins up in your environment on your dev account. And all you have to do is copy over the environment variables. That's it. And if I succeed in my hazing of Convex, that'll be included too. If somebody wants to contribute to one of my projects, they don't have to be part of my Convex account. They can just clone the repo, run the dev command, get a little URL they click to auth with Convex for the first time, and they're done. That's all it takes. It is so easy to onboard onto a project using Convex. It's almost like annoying, because then when I have to use anything else and collab with other people, it is the worst. But it's so easy to spin up. And this is the thing. Everything with Convex is somewhere between 0 and 2 steps. With a platform like Supabase, your options are either they already built it for you or you're going somewhere else. They've provided this alternative set of primitives with things like queries, mutations, and actions, with things like the Convex folder in the code base, with things like components and all the stuff you can do with them. They're providing us a better set of tools to build with. And those tools might be a smaller set than we're used to having, but it's a smaller set that works much better, scales much better, and just makes so many problems go away. And it feels really weird. I had about 4 years of being very unsure of Convex. I just didn't think this type of thing would ever be for me. And now I can't imagine building without it. And that's why we're seeing so many devs moving over. People like Peter, who probably could never have cared less about something like Convex before, suddenly getting hyped. Peter was able to build in 3 hours a full site with GitHub login, admin module, file storage, and NPM packages that sync skills on disk and versioning and moderation, all with Convex for syncing his Twitter auth for Claudebot. That's so cool. I was able to build the first pass on Image Studio similarly. You can do this with Supabase, but you're going to be spending a lot more time in the dashboard configuring MCPs and trying to get everything linked. Not with Convex. So Jamie's in my chat, as he often is. He hangs out because, again, they're like us. I don't know how to emphasize this properly. Jamie's just a guy who hangs out in the same circles as us, watches the same things as us, just a fellow nerd. And Shamu summarized partly. The people that work there are really cool. The Convex team is awesome. Are there downsides? We can talk about downsides quick. The biggest one is the same thing I think is one of the biggest benefits, which is you have to access things through the queries and mutations that you define in the code base. If you have some data analyst that wants to run something against all of the data in your database, Convex isn't for that. Convex is an application database for building apps. As long as the database is only accessed through the apps, you're going to have an incredible time, especially if they use TypeScript. I would argue that if you're not using TypeScript for your clients anywhere, that Convex is probably not worth it because it's very, very, very strong within the TypeScript world. All their SDKs and everything are great. They have packages for other stuff, but they're definitely not the same quality tier as the TypeScript stuff right now. I could see that changing in the future, but I also don't care. I'm just going to write TypeScript. Like if I'm building an application experience shipping to users, that should be in TypeScript. They also just generally aren't structured for gigantic queries and mutations. There's a limit to how many rows you can hit and how much data you can hit in a given query. So if you want to do a query that is get every single row out of my giant database with hundreds of millions of rows and then count like which ones have the longest message length or something, you're going to have a rough time. It's not built for those types of things. Those like select everything queries. A lot of that's because they architected it to not lead you down those paths. A lot of the way Convex is designed is around leading you and the developers contributing towards things that are actually performant. They make it hard to write code that isn't performant, and you'll feel really gross and bad as you do it because you're not supposed to do things that way. Especially on like the analytics side, they have solutions for a lot of that. Like they have a component for aggregates and a sharded counter for having things that like count and go up and down and tracking that. Like we should have implemented this for the T3 chat history thing. We didn't, but we probably should have. Especially the aggregate stuff seems really cool. That said, you can just fire hose it out somewhere else. They have a whole streaming data in and out of Convex section that explains in detail how to set up the exports to automatically stream data out to stuff like Databricks or Snowflake so that if you want to do analytics on that data, you can. They say it right. Convex isn't optimized for queries that load huge amounts of data. They're transparent about it, and they give you solutions. And this is the difference. Convex knows what they're bad at and are very quick to explain to you how to handle the things they're bad at if you want to do them. This has actually been a problem I've had with almost every other database provider. They try to convince me that my problem is wrong or that I'm stupid for thinking I need to solve things this way. Convex is very quick to put up their hands and say, nope, we don't do that. Here's what we recommend. It's a huge difference. That said, if the majority of what you need your database for is analytics, if you have people that want to do very flexible queries on the servers directly, this is not the database for you. If you want to have a good experience building applications that are user-facing, that's what Convex is for. It is the best database platform ever made for application development. So if you're building apps in TypeScript, they're for you. If you're not using TypeScript anywhere, or you're not building apps, you're just building data analytics type stuff, go use something else. This is not the solution for you. Trying to think of other downsides. You'll never want to use anything else. That's a very real one. It's like a very real one, actually. Gonna do one more demo for fun, just to emphasize how good this stuff is. I'm gonna rebuild the image generation studio. I want to build an image gen studio. Use your front-end design skill to make it beautiful. use Vite, React, Bun, and for the image generation, do it through FAL. I want to generate images using Nano Banana Pro. Use Convex as the database. Don't worry about auth. All backend functions should be done through Convex. Research and use whatever docs you think are necessary to build this. I'm going to let Claude Code just build this for us. We'll do a plan, then we'll build. And thank you to my friends at Whisperflow for making it so easy to just speak that to my computer. The fact that it knows the proper capitalizations and everything for all the stuff I mentioned there is so nice. Okay, I figured out that FAL, F-O-W-L, was meant to be FAL, F-A-L. Cool. Only typo it had. I have given it no prior context. I have not included anything in any markdown files anywhere. I don't have some MCP or LLM's text or anything hidden. I'm on a very boring stock Claude Code install here. The front end skill is something I added, but it's just one thing. It's a markdown file that tells it to not suck at front end. It's not my front end skill, it's theirs. It is literally just this markdown file that is telling it to not do slop. That asks questions, gallery of past images, dark mode, store in Convex, submit. Cool. Remember, Claude Code is capable of extraordinary creative work. Don't hold back. Show what can truly be created when thinking outside the box and committing fully to a distinctive vision. Oh, Claude. So I just had Claude Code from scratch build the Image Studio app again with Convex. Let's create a new project, personal account. Again, like I've already authed to Convex. If I didn't, I would have had to click one link, sign in with GitHub. But since I have, it just links, choose a team, give it a name, some name. I actually like the default, so we'll go with the default Convex Claude Code demo. You can choose if you want to use the cloud or a local deployment if you want to just run it on your machine. I've never actually bothered because I like the cloud stuff so much. It's really convenient. So we'll do cloud. Now I've linked to it in the dashboard, which I do actually need to do because I have to go grab the FAL key. Oh, I have to sign in. What an inconvenience. Now we're in on this dash, settings, env, add FAL _ key. Now give me a sec to go grab that. It has 1 or 2 type errors because there still is no LSP support by default in Claude Code. It's super broken. It would have found those otherwise. It just thinks these things are strings, but they're more specific in the database definition. Whatever. It still is going to deploy, I think. Let me new tab it. npx tsc, see. Nope. It is not seeing the same type error as Convex is. I will tell it that. If you npx tsc in the Convex dir, you will see some type errors. Fix them. Okay, cool. All of those are fixed and it auto-deployed when they were fixed. Let's see if it worked. Image Studio. 2 corgis riding a bike. 2K, generate. It auto-appeared in the UI here. It is running on the server. And if all went well, then in just a moment, we will see 2 corgis riding a bike without me writing a single line of code, all in about 20 minutes just running Claude Code. Oh no, an argument validation error. We can copy that, paste it to Claude. Also of note, one of my favorite things about Convex, since this is all happening on the cloud, you have the Convex logs where you can see all of these things going wrong here as well. It shows it to you in the terminal as well because it's happening with that code that you put there. File API returns null for width height, added a nullish coalescence to handle that. Cool. 2 corgis riding a bike. I'll knock down the res so it's faster. And there we go. 1 shot, 2 errors, copy pasted into Claude Code, 0 code looked at or written, full stack, image gen, synced across web and server, all handled in the database directly. And ready just for one last piece of magic. We have these 2 creations here. One failed, one didn't. Select, delete. And it vanishes from the UI. Are you kidding? Magic. It is unbelievable what the Convex team has cooked here. If you haven't tried it yet, you have no idea how much you're missing out. Convex has made my life building applications not just easier, but absurdly more fun. And I highly recommend you check it out yourself. Sorry, Supabase. I just want to set my audience up for the best possible tools in modern times, and it really feels like Convex is that tool. They're not paying me to shill at this point. I did invest because I like them that much, but I hope you understand how genuine my love of Convex is and how long it took for me to get here. I hope that these videos help you skip some steps and fall in love with it yourself. Thank you to everybody for watching, and thank you to Convex for taking the time to convince me. I hope I'm doing a good job paying that forward. Go build something fun, and until next time, peace, nerds.